always remember the power that you have innately. Always remember that what you come from is something cosmic, it's something eternal, it's something infinite. And the power that we hold here in the pentagram, in the phi-based being that we're experiencing, that is priceless. It is priceless energy. And so much of this world, especially within social structures, has been engineered to take that power away from us. Because there are entities, there are individuals, there are whole systems that are devoted to powering their own projections by taking that of the masses and actually using that to create things that are not in your best interest, let me say, right? There are factions on this planet that are dedicated to distorting the original frequencies, distorting nature, distorting the divine mother, if you will. And there's so many ways in which they do this. And today I want to break down some of those ways and how they're stealing your energy. And we might not even know they're stealing our energy. And it's all in the code, it's all in the language, it's right in front of us. But we just have to open our eyes, we have to open our hearts to actually see what's happening and remember who we are. So, first off, I have the concept of star power, of course, right? I've talked about this before, the different shapes, the different ways that this pentagram represents a being. And this being can collapse upon itself and be sucking in energy from the outside because it's not whole. It's not casting the light that it is here. So let's talk about the celebrity worship that goes on this planet, right? So celebrity, you have cell, which is sell, like sail. Sail is ail. So it's literally saying it's an ailment to you. The thing is, people literally worship these stars, right? They call them the stars, and they see them in movies. They see them, they might be sports stars, you have movie stars, you have music stars, pop stars, right? You even have the political figures. And people are always looking at these beings as if they're stars and you're not, which that's the problem in itself, my friends. It's that people don't see that we are the same level as these beings that people worship and that people look up to and that people literally idolize. And I want you to think of that word idolize. Okay, so idolize, it's the same as eidolons, and eidolons talk about spirits. So this is the same as I was talking about in previous videos with spirits and egregores. And just a quick refresher on that in case you didn't see those videos. Spirits and egregores particularly, are essentially group consciousness thought forms. So this is essentially when a specific thing can develop a cult following because enough people put their energy, emotions, thoughts into that specific idea that it actually becomes something manifest and it creates its own magnetism and it actually begins pulling people's energy to it. So, I mean, someone that comes to mind is like the whole Taylor Swift thing, right? Where it's like, this is a person that it's like, you know, there's a million musicians in the world that are far more talented, but this person is like one of the richest, biggest musicians in the world. A lot of them are like this on this high level, but they seem to have this cult following. This has to do with actual entities, actual spiritual entities that back these beings. There's a lot that goes into this in Hollywood and with the sort of covenants that these artists, if you will, enter into. But these eidolons essentially become idols through creating some sort of spiritual projection that sucks people in who have a weak consciousness. Okay? This goes on in so many different ways that it's kind of concerning that people aren't seeing it. But as far as the pop stars, as far as the sports stars, the movie celebrities and things like that, people are idolizing them despite the fact that they have no knowledge. The people that are being idolized, they have no knowledge. They are not spiritually awake. They are not evolved. They're not developed. But people get this confused. They see the wealth. They see like the regard and the respect that they get from so many other people. And then they fall into this trap that they're like, oh, they must be great because all these other people are worshiping them and they think that they're great. And they're such a bright star. And that means that you're not. Which this is the power trap, my friends. This is these eidolons, these egregores on another level that are just sucking people in because they want your power, they want your energy to continue to fuel their projection. We need to recognize exactly where to draw the line here. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with entertainment. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with art. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with playing games or anything like that. But we have to understand where these entities are taking power from people, and how this can be such a huge problem when we recognize what our power can actually do, right? Because I've talked about the fact that if we can create egregors, if we can create spiritual entities on another plane, that means within our consciousness and within the star power, the energy that we have within ourselves, we can actually create beings. We can create life. We can create projections that can outlive us, projections that can actually take on their own life. We have the power to conceive, in other words, my friends. And when we're giving this power to these beings that are simply distorted life forms, serving distorted life forms, we're only creating more of a problem where we have these energies that are splitting, right? Now, this is a huge problem in sports. And I want to talk about this because the wording behind some sports concepts are actually pretty interesting. The word sports initially actually comes from a Latin word called disporte, and I might not be pronouncing that correctly, but it's Desporte, disporta, and that means to divert, literally. So they're talking about how this is a diversion, and this also ties back into the Roman era where we had the Colosseum, and essentially there was all this nonsense going on in the country, and they basically said, okay, we're going to give them bread and we're going to give them wine and we're going to give them this circus and watch these gladiators fight each other, and they will be distracted. Like, they will be sufficiently stimulated, sufficiently entertained that they're not going to pay attention to what's actually going on. The interesting thing about this is sports nowadays are the same exact thing. Now, when you look at football, like the American version of football, where it's not soccer, they call their big event at the end of the year the Super Bowl. And a bowl is a torus field, right? A torus field is a combination of electric and magnetic energy that attracts or repels certain things. We are a torus field within this phi that we are. When it's healthy, it's actually channeling the energy upward and creating sort of like this donut effect, right? When it's unhealthy, it's doing the opposite and it's pulling everything down, okay? So when they're creating a Super Bowl, and that bowl is based off of literally two poles, a red and a blue team, right? And they hate each other. What you're getting is literally two opposing energy forces coming into a huge field that literally just creates more distortion. It's like a spiritual exhaust vent, quite literally, because all this energy is just going into our team, no, our team, us, them, division. And the more of this energy of division that plays out, the more this energy just gets wasted. Quite honestly, if you were to take a stadium full of people and you were to have them all, say, meditate or focus upon a unified goal or unified outcome, imagine the power of that. Imagine what could actually be done and what could actually be created if that were to be the case, instead of no us, no them, no us, no them. Like I said, the problem is not the game itself, it is the level that it's being done on. Because you also have people that literally worship these sports stars, right? Forgetting that they're the stars too, but I mean, they will go as far as to wear a jersey or something and put another person's name on your back. And remember, the names, the letters are the characters. The characters are the stars. So to say that, like, I'm going to put this name on my back that's not my name, that's this. That's you literally saying, I'm not this, so I'm going to be this star that collapses on itself, and I'm going to only get my power from this external entity, this external source. This is no different from religion, quite honestly. You're worshiping something. You're taking something and you're putting it above yourself, and you're repping that. I want to talk about the words repping, reppin, rep and dem. Okay, so where does that sound familiar? And it's super prevalent in the world right now because people are playing this game of red and blue, right? The Republicans and the Democrats, rep and dem, reptiles and demons. Okay, we have this huge division in terms of who thinks this is the right way and who thinks this is the right way. And these are both distorted entities. They're both distorted pathways, because really when it comes down to it, secret societies, secret organizations, shadow banks own the whole political system. That's a whole other topic that we're not going to get into today, but we need to recognize that there's people out there that are literally just playing this game of, our team is the best team, and anything that is opposing to that, they're evil and they're bad, and we need to get away from them. These are demonic entities, my friends. And demonic entities, they don't have to be like these horror movies that you've seen. They can literally just be Like they'll come into your head and they'll give you an idea, and if you agree with that idea, they're going to gas you up. Right? This is when you see the people out on the streets that they're going crazy about something, they're yelling at this person and they're upset about this, and they just like they cannot hear reason at all. It's just like they're just screaming out distortion out of their mouth, just spewing propaganda. They have no real knowledge. This I'm not equating this to either side of the red or blue because it happens on both sides. When you get to the extreme polarities, what you end up having are entities that come in and swoop into a person's mind. And because these entities thrive on distortion, keep that in mind. The more distorted energy they can actually put out, the more that they get back, and the more they fuel their projection of distortion, which is where they live, which is how they thrive, okay? So you have on both sides of the spectrum people that get so deeply invested into it that these entities come and they say, well, this and this and this, and this is a cult, and this is this, and they start saying all this nonsense and not actually realizing like the spectrum that they're in of just looking at themselves, because right, we're all one being essentially, and not recognizing that it's like these people, like they have viewpoints too, and they have viewpoints too, and not being able to see it from a objective, removed point of view. This is where entities thrive, okay? Because if you can get them into a polarized place, this is interesting with how entities function. Because if you get a person that is more in tune with their truth, and they have a more open mind, and they can see things as not as subjectively, entities will try to tear them down. They'll get around you and they'll start tearing you apart. They'll start trying to make you feel less confident, make you feel like you should doubt yourself, make you feel like you're failing, and all of this stuff. They will try to tear you down because they want you to be more confused. They want you to be more susceptible to what they're actually putting out. However, if you get a person that is already confused, they are already in this realm of distortion and nonsense and madness, these same entities will gas them up because they want more of that. They'll start telling you, yeah, you're totally right, man. That guy's totally wrong. You should go start a fight, or you should go tell him how stupid he is. You should go do this. And they will get in your head and in your space and start making you more confident, make that ego bigger, inflate it, give it more fuel. So this is an interesting duality as to how the entities will function, but this is another reason to just not get involved with certain things, right? I'm not saying like don't have an opinion. I'm not saying don't stand for beliefs if you have beliefs. What I am saying is that you have to recognize the different realms that are involved here. When you're playing in the realms of the sports and the division, and you're playing in the realms of the political, the reps and the dems, what you're going to end up having is a realm that literally is built on conflict, which is a distorted energy, just like this Super Bowl, this super torus of two divided fields that are coming and taking place. So recognize that if you get involved and if you choose one of the polarities, you are stepping out of your power. You are literally going to get infected, if you will, with the distortion by choosing to engage with the distortion on one side or another. Now, this is a tough thing for us to realize because many of us who actually reside in a frequency of truth and a frequency of peace and harmony and unity, we sometimes, those of us that have more of a warrior spirit, if you will, I definitely know I kind of tend towards that polarity. I would want to get involved with things and say like, hey, why don't you consider this or be open to this or be open to this? That's fine and all, but you have to recognize when it gets to a point of like, it's still that same division of us and them. It's still that same like, I'm going to go and slay the demon that is doing the bad thing, that is causing the distortion. We have to be very aware of if we're doing that or not. Because as soon as you go and slay the proverbial demon, so to speak, you're going to get that blood all over yourself. And now you are that same frequency. Now you are the warmonger, if you will. You are the one creating more separation and more division. So then we might ask, like, well, what do we even do about it? And this takes me back to the beginning of what I was talking about. We recognize our true star power. Because what we have to recognize about people who are looking for star power outside of themselves is that they're lost in the dark and they're looking for the light. Should be pretty straightforward to recognize that, right? But that means that they're looking for the false light often because it's the limelight, as they call it, right? It's what's being put out in front of them, what triggers their emotions, what makes them feel something, what other people are doing that they feel safe to do because other people are doing. They're looking for that. And oftentimes that's a lot louder, if you will, than the truth. But my friends, it is not more potent than the truth. And that makes a huge difference, because when we can reside within our own star power and be casting that light, be a literal pillar of light for the space, what ends up happening when these frequencies become exhausted in a person and they're actually wondering, like, why are things so chaotic for me? Why am I attracting so much chaos? In other words, when people start developing their own self-awareness of what's happening and then what they might be paying attention to that's causing those things, they begin to look for the truth. And the truth on this planet is so potent that I don't know an exact ratio to this. I'm not going to try to put an exact ratio to this, but for every one of us that is truly standing in our light and in our presence and not getting involved in these distorted debacles of back and forth, left and right, this and that, for every one of us that is choosing to stay in that place of integrity, there are many, 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 many others in the field, in the collective consciousness, that are being affected by that, whether they know it or not. That is the essence of potency, my friends. That is the power of potency, of truth, and residing on a frequency that is clear, that is not distorted. That clear energy is so much more powerful than the distortion. It is so much brighter and clearer than the false light that it naturally takes place where people start waking up to it. This is like the great awakening on the planet, as they call it. It's not necessarily because people are like going to these people that are distorted and being like, wake up, like you're right. That's not how it happens. If people are open to the information and open to the conversations, that's great. But you cannot force someone to essentially vibe with a frequency they're not ready to vibe with yet. But if we're staying in our space and we're staying in our power, then eventually that frequency, it's pervading their field whether they know it or not. And within all of us, because we're all made of the same things, right? We're all stars, literally. We are all that star power, that star energy. When we reside in that frequency, that potency vibrates through resonance, right? This is called sympathetic resonance. It'd be like saying if I were to sing a pitch in a room and there was, say, like a guitar, a stringed instrument or something in the room, and it had strings that were similar to that pitch that I was singing, those strings would vibrate with it because those frequencies matched and they would resonate together. In other words, the resonation that you're putting out of actual truth and potency, that's going to resonate with the deep core of somebody, whether or not they're awake, whether or not they're conscious of themselves. But the thing is, this can trigger people, quite honestly, because despite the fact that we all have that star core within ourselves, it can be so buried in programming, in propaganda, and these ideas about this and that who knows where they got them, just distorted concepts. So you might trigger people for that reason, because they might feel that light and then they see all the trauma within them, and instead of embracing that trauma and recognizing that it's theirs to deal with, they project it outwardly and say, no, this is your fault. No, it's because of you did this, you're the problem, like you're this and that. And this is honestly the problem with the whole polarity thing, the rep and dems, the red and blues, the divisions, the looking outward to something. It's this essence of not wanting to take responsibility from the point of not recognizing who we are, why we're here, and what we're doing. These are all such important things to come into to realization of, because if you can't take responsibility for yourself, then you're constantly going to be blaming something outside of yourself, which is the cause of the problem, which is what you don't want to get infected by. Because that's the distortion that is going to dim your light. And if you dim your light, you're doing a disservice to everybody. By standing in your truth, by embracing your power, and by not worrying about these systems of division, you're going to know that you're doing everything that you possibly can to actually uphold the light, which is what we're here to do. We're here to uphold that specific light. And like I said, you don't be afraid to like discuss with people or have debates with people if that's the kind of person that you are. That's okay. But you have to recognize when it gets to a point of like, they're the enemy and I need to slay the demon, if you will, right? It's very different than like, I'm going to try to approach you with some information and we can discuss, and I'm going to listen and you're going to listen. And if it's respectful like that and it's balanced and it's just a simple exchange between people, that's when you actually like make the most progress, because you're actually tapping into these frequencies of harmoniousness between you two. And that's where you get the most growth, because then you make a person feel safe to actually like open up to that frequency and step into like, whoa, yeah, I kind of feel that way too. And then you give them those new ideas, you give them those lights coming on in your head, right? But it is not about, we can't fix anyone. We can't force anyone to wake up. We can't force anyone to see the light that they already are. And this system has designed people, it has programmed people from a very young age to be looking for that light outside of themselves, because, my friends, they are in fact lost in the dark. They are lost in the dark looking for the light, and the false light is louder. The false light caters to what they're afraid of. It caters to, like, I need to feel safety and I'm afraid of this, and I need to look at something that I think is higher, because they've never had that experience of the essences, the energies, the consciousness that is actually higher. And that is a scary thing for a lot of people. To face yourself, it requires tremendous courage. So, my friends, recognize the traps that are being set for us in this reality. Make sure that you are not getting swept up in them to where you dim your light, and realize we need to be compassionate towards people that are lost. Okay? It's easy to see this world as like there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of this and that and a lot of like dumb people doing this and that. And we have to recognize that this is all a part of the process that has been going on for thousands of years. Who knows how long in reality? And it will continue to go on for thousands of years as consciousness will unify. Not everyone will wake up. That's not the point here. But as time goes on, more people will wake up, and the planet will have to become more harmonious in order to cater to those people that are actually becoming conscious and actually starting to see the bigger picture of the Supreme Self, of the soul that pervades everything, of the light, of the star power that we already are and that we already have been here doing. Okay? So, my friends, it's always been within you. You've always had it. As I'm always saying, you are the star that you're looking for. You are the light that you're seeking, and people need your light. So remember who you are. Remember what we're about. And with that, my friends, be whole, be well, and we'll talk soon. Take care.